one of the lessons of the Nussbauer Knaflic book is the importance of choosing an appropriate visualization. And as you know, there are a large number of different charts and chart types that you can choose from, including column charts, bar charts, pie charts, line graphs, scatter graphs, bubble charts, and so on. So the question then becomes, when do you use which chart? Now, there are no hard and fast rules about choosing the correct chart, but there are some guidelines. And in general, there are 4 questions that need to be answered before you choose a chart. The first question, and probably the most important question, is what is the purpose of the chart? What message do you want to convey with the chart? And obviously that goes back to lesson 1 in the Nussbauer Knaflic book about what do you want your audience to know? And in general, a chart can have 1 of 4 purposes. The first one is to compare values. So, for example, suppose that I have calculated the net margins for different car makes in the car database. Then I may want to compare the different net margins for the different cars. Or you may want to use a graph. Second, you may want to use a graph to show a relationship between 2 values, such as income and health. So, for example, in the Dr. Rosling's talk that we looked at when we looked at examples of telling stories with data, many of the charts compare an economic variable, such as income, against a health-related variable, such as child mortality. The third use of a graph is to show some distribution. For example, I may want to show a grade distribution in a class. And the final thing that you may want to use a graph for is to show how a whole is composed of parts. So suppose I have total of all car sales. I may want to know which percentage of each of those sales took place in each country that I have in my database. The second question that you need to ask yourself is the number of variables you want the graph to display. So is it 1, 2, 3, or more variables that we want to combine in a graph? The third question is, how many data points do we have for each variable? Suppose that I want to display the age distribution in a population. Do we use a large number of small buckets, for example, 0 to 20 years old, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and so on? Or do we want a much larger number of very small buckets, so that, for example, we define age in terms of years and months? The final question is, whether you want to display some trend, for example, or over time or over distance. For example, in a chart showing the number of applications to a university, you might be interested in showing the number of applications each week prior to the application deadline. Or you might be interested in showing the number of applications originating from a certain distance, a physical distance from the university. So for example, to answer the question, how many applications originate from within a 50-mile radius of the university? So while there are no hard and fast rules, you can use those questions to help you guide your decision for a chart. And I'm going to share a visualization with you that is also available on the Canvas site that shows this a little better. So you see that they've plotted all the different chart types around the periphery. And you see that we start with, what would you like to show? What is the message you want to convey? Is it a comparison between values? Is it the relationship between variables? Is it the distribution of values? Or is it the composition of some whole of elements? And then you see, and it's a little bit harder to see, is that, for example, if you want to do convey a relationship, is it two variables? Well, if it's two variables, then a scatter chart is a good idea. If it's three variables, then a bubble chart is a good idea, and so on. So what I suggest you do is that you take some time to look at this chart and use it as you start thinking about which visualizations to use for the visualizations for your project.